very quickly, maybe we should introduce ourselves. So, so I'm Alex Marsh. I'm from the University of Bristol, and I chair the board. I'll go around my screen if you don't mind. So start with Pete Daw.
Hi, I'm Pete Daw. I'm a council tenant, deputy chair of the board, and fellow at the Chartered Institute of Housing.
Fantastic, thanks, Peter. Alison.
Alison Scott. I'm a housing manager, and I've got an item on the agenda later on.
Fantastic. Paul Sylvester.
Evening, everyone. Paul Sylvester, head of Housing Options, here to talk about home choice.
Fantastic, thank you. Sarah.
Sarah Spicer, Business Innovation Manager. I'm also presenting a short update later, and I'll be here for the whole meeting.
Thank you very much. Liz.
Hi everyone, Liz Sheetham, Engagement Team Leader, and I'm supporting tenant engagement with the board tonight.
Fantastic. Most of you will have had contact with Jeremy, but Jeremy, if you'd like to just introduce yourself there.
Yeah, my name's Jeremy Livitt from Democratic Services, and I'm clerking the meeting.
Fantastic, thank you. So coming down to my next row, so Councillor Classic.
Hi, Councillor Sarah Classic, Henbrook and Whitchurch Park.
Fantastic. And we've got Nigel.
Nigel Varley, tenant from Gilton House in Brislington.
I think Donald's just asked a question in the chat. I think we're all speaking, so I think maybe you can't hear. Thank you. So moving across, Tony to Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, Councillor Tony Dyer, Southfield Ward.
Fantastic. John.
Just going to say to Donald, it might wonder if it's the headphones again. Might be worth checking. See if it's a headphones issue, similar to what I had.
You'll need to put that in the chat if you can't hear anything.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Sorry. I'll send.
Was that me, Alex? Did you refer to
sorry, I'm just about to come to you. Yeah, John, please introduce yourself.
Thanks very much. Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name's John Smith. I have recently been appointed as the Executive Director for Growth and Regen on a fixed term basis, just till June, till after the elections. So I'm delighted to be here. Thanks very much. Good to meet you all.
Thanks for joining us. Philip.
Hello, Philip Morris, resident of Bedminster, and I think this Microsoft is rubbish. I can't see anything. Go back to Zoom.
Okay. So I'll leave that with colleagues who are dealing with the tech. I don't know whether if Donald can't hear us, someone else might have to introduce him.
Please do not take large items. I can introduce Donald. So Donald Graham, who's the Director of Housing and Landlord Services, is with us in person, kind of. So unfortunately, he can't hear us at the moment. For anyone who hasn't read the chat, so hopefully you might get his sound issues sorted out soon and be able to hear us and join in the conversation.
Thank you. And somebody's running something in the background that's talking about luggage, so I don't know where that's happening. But anyway, over to those without camera. So Councillor Bales.
Hello, I'm Councillor Bales, Hartcliffe and Withywood Ward. I'm also a council tenant.
Thank you very much. And finally, we've got Adam up there on the side. Adam Postons.
Yeah, hi everyone. Adam Postons, local democracy reporter.
Welcome. Thanks very much. Okay, so that's us for today. Welcome everybody. So shall we move along? So Jeremy, apologies for absence.
Yes, just one apology that I've received actually, which is from Councillor Richard Eddy.
Okay.
This is the only actual apology I've received.
And Liz, would you like to add to the list?
Yes, we did have an apologies from Peter Edwards, who's stepping down. So just to let you know, thank you.
Yeah, I did receive that as well, but I assumed as he I didn't know whether he'd actually formally resigned yet or not, so I didn't actually report that bit yet.
But no, that's helpful. But he did us the courtesy of notifying. So there we go. Right. So in terms of matters, so minutes of the last meeting. So we're looking at pages 7 to
coming out speakers. Is that you?
Okay, so Tony's asked for Carla Denier's apologies to be recorded as well. So if we can add that to the list, thank you. So just in terms of the minutes of the last meeting, firstly, those of us who were present, is there anything there that is you'd like to question, query, caveat, or do we take those as a record? Sarah?
I think there's one small amendment, Alex. So
Okay.
there's a reference to a park, and I think we have it in the minutes is Eastville Park, but it was actually Eastfield. So if we could get that changed, that would be great. Thank you.
That's correct. Councillor Renhard advised me about that, so I'll alter that.
Okay, so we'll get that geographically specific. Liz?
So question, if I may.
I've got, can I do it in order I've seen them? So I've got Liz, I've got Philip, and then I've got Pete. So Liz first.
Yes, I think it was under home choice, and I think there was an action point. It was Liz Dewing's presentation. I think the action point was my name was against it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's just a correction there to a different Liz. A different Liz. Okay, fine. Philip next, then Peter.
Hi. I can't see the minutes. I've not received them. I can't see them. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, that's
right. They were sent when, well, I emailed out to all members of the Housing Management Board. I emailed the pack together with the link to the Teams meeting. So you should have received it in the agenda pack that I sent out to you.
No. I had two emails, one from the City Diary and one from Everbright or whatever it's called, telling me the meeting was on.
Eventbrite.
Okay, I'll have to look into that. But I'm pretty certain you're on my distribution list.
Oh, well,
so I emailed to, as I said, the agenda and the Teams link. How did you actually get this link to this meeting?
On Yahoo.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay. So
So
there's
I'll have to look into that to see what's happened. But as far as I'm aware, you're on the distribution, so you should have received both the link and the
Normally
agenda.
I get them. Thank you.
Okay. So now I've got Peter and then I've got Nigel. Peter?
Two very quick things. So item 19, minutes of the previous meeting of 30th of May, still no contact from the Homes and Communities Board, which I think now goes past the 2-year mark. So can that be followed up again? And apologies if it's coming up later on the agenda, but in the minutes we were notified of Peter Edwards' departure, but his successor wasn't announced. I don't know whether that comes up as in the agenda item later or whether that could be announced now.
Sarah?
It's on as an agenda item, so we will get to
It
that.
is.
In due
Thank
course.
you. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
So Nigel, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I haven't received the minutes either. I'm only an associate member. I got the agenda from you, but the minutes weren't in it.
Well,
I don't know whether there's a differentiation between full members and associate members in terms of what they get. But anyway,
the minutes went out with the agenda. They're actually an item in the agenda pack. It's actually agenda item 2, I think it is. In your pack.
So in theory, if you can see the agenda, then it should be part of the same PDF file. If you scroll down, in theory, but
yeah, it's pages 7 through to just checking now
14,
through to 13.
Okay.
Item 2 on the agenda pack that I sent out.
Oh yeah, sorry, my apologies.
Okay, so
sorry,
no problem. So we take that apart from those corrections that have been noted. We'll take those meetings as a record of our last engagement. So let's just run quickly through. So Pete's always just started to pick up on the actions, but if we run through quickly, I'm now on page 8. Matters arising. Sarah to contact Philip and investigate further. Tony to assist. How are we with that? This is about scooters.
Phil and I have exchanged some emails, and I think I've had another email a couple of days ago, Phil, which I'm going to follow up on tomorrow with you. So yes, we are in contact.
Okay, so Pete picked up on the next one. So Councillor Reynard to follow up. Well, it appears that one might need further following up by the sound of it. So can we hold that over and keep it as an action for next time around? Sarah, social disorder, Northfield House.
Again, that was with Phil. We're in contact with each other.
Okay, and then we've got Sylvester raised the issue of Holston Drive. That again is you, Sarah, I feel.
So I've asked Alison Scott if she might be able to provide an update on that as part of her item on EIB and NIB.
Okay. So we pick that up later. Okay.
We'll pick that up as part of the agenda item.
And the last one on that page is Tom Raynard to pick up issues of the TOMS mechanism as required. So the question is, does anybody know if that has been required since last we met?
I'm sorry, I don't. I did think Tom was going to be here this evening, so I didn't chase him for any of his actions. So we can check that for next time and carry over.
Okay, it may not have arisen in the meantime, but let's check. And Nigel, is that a previous hand or a new hand you've got up there?
A new hand under matters arising.
Okay.
Just to clarify my status, am I allowed to do this as an associate member to raise things and?
Absolutely.
Seems fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Just on that, it says action. Alison notified when I voted because of response and concerns about the impact of vents smelling smoke. The vents have been checked, and there's a strange mechanism which does close them when there's through heat. So that's not a safety problem anymore. And thanks to the council for sending an engineer out twice to check that and then explain it. The other thing I think that is necessary, because work's going on to make the improvements at Gilton House, the cladding's being stripped off and new windows are being fitted, and the process by which this happens needs to be reviewed, because all sorts of problems are coming up, both for us and the neighbourhood, because polystyrene is being spread far and wide. And I notice a number of flats are getting done now. So I think at some stage there needs to be a review of the way in which fire safety improvements are being made, how to minimise the disruption. The other effect, of course, is when they remove the cladding, they remove all the insulation. Our flats are freezing cold at the moment. The other thing is, I've raised this before, I think there needs to be an investigation as to how the problem arose. How did it happen that the council was assured that its cladding was safe, and then there were fires, and then suddenly millions and millions of pounds over 10 years have got to be safe, making them better? I mean, the cladding issue's been around since Grenfell, which was 5 years ago. And I think not so much to go yarboots up to the council, but to learn lessons, we need really quite an extensive review of how this crisis, and it is a crisis, came about, involving the tenants as well. I know the council officers are reluctant because of they're worried about the vast amount of time this may take, but even so, I think it might be worth it.
Thank you, Nigel. So Sarah, will you put your hand up? Is that to respond to that point particularly, or Alison? I don't know who would like to take it.
So the point I was going to respond to was just about the review on how the polystyrene is being taken down. So Nigel, just some assurance that our colleague Craig Cook, who's the head of response and maintenance, has met with the contractor, I believe, in the last 2 weeks, and they are reviewing how they are removing the polystyrene to minimise the impact and try and eliminate the amount of polystyrene bits that's resulting in that. So they've completely changed the methodology. I don't know what date that change is taking effect from, but I know the meeting is happened quite recently. So that review has already taken place, and there will be some changes to how the polystyrene is being removed to reduce the amount of rubbish and mess that is causing on the site.
Okay. Nigel, did you want to come back on?
Well, yeah, the cladding's off now, apart from the bottom two floors, which you're going to have to wait because the scaffolding's in the way. The other thing you need to look at is the timing of this, because if a lot of blocks are getting done, if they're done in the winter time, if the cladding comes off in the winter time, you're going to have a real problem, because it's freezing cold and something needs to be. I mean, everybody in Gilton House has had their heating on full blast, which is going to do wonders for the electricity bill, and something needs to be looked at in terms of that.
So should we take, so I'm just going to take that as a comment for now for colleagues to take away,
Yeah.
and also your point about the broader lessons learned review. So I think, should we take that as a comment for now, and I invite colleagues to come back on that next time round. I think it seems to be something to be certainly to be considered, if that's okay. And I've got Pete wanting to come in at this point. Pete.
Yeah, really to pick up on Nigel's point about review and how is it possible for the government to sign off materials as safe and then change their mind on them. For Adam's benefit, I think we need to point the blame fairly and squarely with the building research establishment, who absolutely dropped the ball on this. We as a local government were very, very historically risk averse after Ronan Point exploded onto the streets of the capital of London in the 1970s. We didn't go with high rise in prefabricated in the way that other cities of our size did, because we saw the risks that they posed to tenants. And so we opted on the side of, once again, very, very safe cladding, avoiding the mistakes of aluminium that Grenfell Tower fell for. And we have been very badly let down by the advice from the building research establishment, by the advice from central government, where central government has for a very, very many long decades been funded by the house building industry. It's put aside blank checks to private sector developers who have put walking watches in place. We have not been so generously compensated for the failures of local government and central government caused by decisions taken by the building research establishment. We were risk averse, we were prudent, we protected and prioritised the safety of our tenants, and we're facing a tens of millions of pounds bill as a consequence. The blame is fairly and squarely with the building research establishment, and a juicy story for a local government reporter lies in that. If we look at timber frame, for example, I'll end on this, Alex, because I expect you also teach this at the University of Bristol. When the experiment was done for timber frame buildings in the UK's building research establishment, a rig was set up, a property was constructed with a timber frame. It survived the initial fire. 3 days later, after being put out by the fire brigade, it burnt down and very nearly burnt down the entire building research establishment. The form of timber framing was deemed to be safe because it survived the initial test, even though it jeopardized and nearly burnt down the entire establishment 3 days later. Such is the decisions made by the building research establishment. Draw your own judgment as to whether you feel safe living in a building signed off as safe by them.
Well, thank you for that. I wasn't expecting Ronan Point this evening, but there we go. So a bit of housing, bit of housing history. Well, absolutely right. Good.
Can I come back?
Very briefly, yes.
Very briefly, yeah.
Yes.
I absolutely endorse what you say, and this mustn't be an attack on Bristol City Council, nor the concept of council housing, because it goes to the heart of council housing. I mean, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Bristol had passed its housing stock over to some housing association or other trying to avoid rude words. I was going to try and avoid rude words, but anyway, if it had been private, if it had been housing association, this would never have got done. The reaction of Bristol City Council, this is important for the members of the press here, is an endorsement of council housing as a concept. And any review, the point of it must be to support and endorse council housing against attacks from central government ever since the 1980s and the sale of council houses and the Blessed Margaret.
Indeed. So we'll take that. I think we'll take that as a comment as well. So just we've got a couple of actions from last time to sort of get through. So we got the Alison Napper comment. The second one. So we talked about the first one. Address following issues raised: fire marshals not closing doors, fire doors not being smoke proof. Do we have an update on where we are with that?
No, apologies, Alex. Unfortunately, Alison's been out of the office unexpectedly, so we will bring an update for that next time. I mean,
let's pause on it now today. But if you've got an update in the relatively near future, I'm sure colleagues would welcome it circulated by email, at least to get, given it's important. Such an important
we can
issue.
Absolutely do that.
If we could do that, yeah, just to get people updated on where we are. So moving down a couple of pages, we've got an action from. So well, the next one is that Sarah and Jeremy to include on the agenda item relating to damp and mould, but we've heard today that that's going to be held over, or the proposal is to hold that over till next time, I believe, if that's right.
It will be our leading item for our July meeting, Alex.
Okay, fine. And then coming down to page 12, Liz, brackets not Cheetham, put an article in the next, is that right? Not housing news concerning the requirements of people on the electoral roll, is that right?
I think that's right. I think it was Liz Dewing's subject, but I can speak to that. The last edition of Housing News was a cost of living special. I don't know if everyone remembers that. So a lot of the articles and the layout was already in place for that edition of Housing News. So it would be something we'd have to look at for a future edition.
And is there a has there been an there's not really an alternative route for getting that particular time limited message out, is it? I guess in terms of registration on the electoral roll.
Is there anything we could do social media? We can have a look at that, Alex, and see if there's anything going on, but I'm sure the council are promoting that through a variety of ways. Okay. We'll check to see if there's anything we can do that would assist with that, getting that message out.
Okay, fine. Philip, do you put your hand up?
Yeah, just that annually I get a letter from the electoral, the people who are in the electoral roll, and on the top of it tells me failure to register can limit me to £1,000 fine. I've been in touch with the housing electoral roll people, and the lady tells me in 10 years no one has been fined or taken to court for failing to register. And yet, as I understand it, and I stand if I'm wrong, but this is what I got from the local government, or whatever they're called, agency, that the central government grant, which the council gets, is based on the electoral roll. So in Northfield House, there are 17 floors. You work it out, there's six flats per floor, 17 floors. There's only I went to the Central Library today using the open register, which you can read. There's only 47 residents in the block who are on the register. They can't all be illegal immigrants or asylum seekers who aren't allowed to vote. So Bristol's losing a lot of money because it fails to enforce the law. End of story.
Thank you, Philip. Well, I think that's a salutary example, I think, in terms of the gaps on the register. Pete, you got your hand up?
Yes, obviously I have to respond to that because I'm, as some of you know, a former agent for a political party who's run the most difficult and weird, the West of England Combined Authority election, which is not taking place under the Representation of the People's Act, but has its own Act of Parliament that determines how the election takes place. In one of those, Bristol was the only one of the 10 cities to go for it, so we're the only one who run the election under a different term. And what Philip's referring to is very, very important. We've lost bulk registration. So, for example, student halls of residence of university, the university could provide the data to the local authority and automatically register students. 10 to 15% of the city no longer bulk registered because of the change there. Equally, in terms of the voter ID requirements, whilst Bristol is not in the cycle of local elections this May, our colleagues in South Gloss are, and people who would previously have been able to rock up as ambulance voters on foot, as they're called, cannot now do so without also bringing a passport, a driving licence, another form of photographic ID. There is a very ageist nature to this. If your bus pass, for example, is over 70s, automatically accepted as ID. If you're of working age, not. There are anachronisms like this which will disenfranchise particularly council tenants. As nagraphobic, I don't have a passport. As someone medically not allowed to driving licence, I don't have that either. So I have to apply specifically for another form of ID to take with me to the voting station to be able to vote at the next election. And this message has not been got across to Bristol, particularly to tenants of Bristol, Phil's figure about the number on the open register is perhaps a misnomer because, of course, many of us are on the closed register who don't appear on the public version. We have a choice now as to whether our details are publicly available. And in an age of internet selling and post-Cambridge Analytica, a lot of us don't allow that data to be sold publicly. But even so, Bristol should have already a fifth ward. We're getting one at the next general election, but there are so many people who aren't on the register. It's estimated at over 70,000, which is actually the size of a Bristol constituency. We are missing the representation of our people. We're missing the representation of our tenants, and that's 1 in 6 people that we need to get the message across to.
So I'm conscious that as the Housing Management Board, I think the point is well made, and we note that. And I think the injunction for the council to do what it can to get people on the register or alert them to the fact they need to be on the register to exercise their right to vote, whatever. I mean, I think we take that as a point for now because we probably need to move on in terms of our business for today, if that's okay. So thank you for sharing those. And can I invite Sarah to take item 4, which is the proposal for a new associate board member. This is picking up on the Pete Edwards comment earlier on. Sarah.
Yes, so as Peter mentioned, Peter Edwards has stepped down from his role as associate board member, and Peter is a member of the Housing Scrutiny panel, and for that reason the panel were asked to nominate a representative to join the board. So Peter has stood down, and there is a new volunteer from within the Scrutiny panel who is Tim Delarue, who would be interested in joining the board as an associate member. Up until now, we've been reasonably informal about the way that we allow associate members to join, but we do always put the suggestions to the board for your consideration. So I'd like to know if there are any questions or any concerns about the panel putting forward a new representative associate.
Colleagues, questions to Sarah? Nigel,
Sarah,
is that?
Do we need?
Sorry, Pete, and then I got Pete, then Nigel, then Philip. Pete.
I was just going to ask Sarah, do we actually need to formally vote on it? If so, I propose the acceptance of the new member.
Thank you, Peter.
Hold that. Nigel next, and then Philip. You're muted, Nigel.
Yeah. There needs to be greater clarity on how you get on these things. I mean, I know I'm on it. I'm not entirely sure by the process by which I ended up as an associate member, and it's not clear how. It's like a closed sort of circle. I think there needs more information to tenants about how you get on these important bodies. Do you have to be nominated? Do you just start turning up and wangle your way on like I did, or what exactly happens?
Liz, I can see you've come in. Yeah. I know you'll have a response to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Nigel. Nigel and Sylvester joined the Housing Scrutiny panel. Back last year now. And what happened was Housing Management Board representatives were elected from housing forums. And during COVID, the way we delivered forums changed. So we had 2 vacant positions, and it was agreed by the board that, and we also checked this with our legal services department, it was agreed by the board that we, rather than have 2 empty spaces for residents, we could advertise for 2 associate members who'd be interested to come and find out more about the way the board works and observe. And you applied and filled out an application.
Oh yeah, I remember. No, it's all right. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So it was an official process.
There are so many of these tenant participation things that you just lose track of it.
Yeah.
I apologise. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah.
No, right. We're good. I mean, but I think your more general point, Nigel, which is methods of alerting tenants to possible opportunities, seems to me to be a fair point. And as Liz was saying, that this was an arrangement for a particular period of time and a particular situation. So these are things which are, I think, under review and being reflected upon quite how that will work in practice. And the point about making people aware of the opportunities, for the future, as and when things evolve and change and whatever, seems to me to be a absolutely fair one.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, and Philip, you got your hand up. Was it on that particular point?
Yeah, I was just going to say Tim Delarue as far as I'm aware, is great. I would welcome him on the board, but because I don't think you have a leaseholder, and he is a leaseholder. Maybe you have a leaseholder, I don't know. But he's an ex-council employee, housing officer, very good man. I've known him for 20 years. And
Liz, do you want to come?
I would recommend him.
Yes, no, thank you for your comments, Philip. So just to clarify, there is a position currently in our current setup for a representative from our leaseholder forum. They have got a representative and he is on the mailing list, but he's not here tonight. And so we do need to get in touch with him. But Tim would be coming from the housing scrutiny panel in that role.
Well,
but equally, he is a resident as well, leaseholder.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So any thoughts amongst those who don't have their cameras on at the moment? This is, you're able to contribute to this part of the discussion if needs be. Hands up if anybody wants to add anything at this stage. Tony?
Just have no problems with bringing Tim on board.
Okay. Sarah, do you have what you need for this?
Is that?
Absolutely. We will invite Tim to join the board, and Liz, if you could feed back to him, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Paul, are you magically appearing because you wanted to add to that, or in eager anticipation of the next item?
Eager anticipation.
Okay. Right. Fair enough. So we'll take that as the board being content with that proposal, I think, Sarah. Yeah. Okay. In that case, shall we move on to item 5, update on the housing allocations review? Plenty's moved along on that topic over the last little while. So Paul, over to you to share with where we are.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm just going to share the presentation. Hang on one second. Can I just check that everyone can see that okay?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Yep.
Yes.
And great, lovely, thank you. And the type of settings I've got, I can just see Alex. Okay, so if people are asking questions as we go through, Alex, you'll need to let me know. First thing I wanted to say is I wanted to mention Liz Dewing, who's come and talked to you before about the review. So our project manager leading on the allocations review. So Liz isn't here today. She's done the job of getting us through and getting approval at cabinet, and she's moved on to another project, but she just wanted to pass on her best wishes and to say that she enjoyed the times that she came to Housing Management Board and wanted to thank you for your feedback. So just wanted to get that noted. The presentation itself will look very similar to what Liz has come and talked to you about before, because we've gone from what we're taking to cabinet to what's actually been approved. Okay, so I'm going to run through it fairly quickly, I think, because people would have seen a lot of this before. By all means, stop me and ask me questions as we're going through, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions as needed. Yep, so really pleased that we've got this over the line, and we had the recommendations approved at cabinet on the 4th of April. Clearly the job doesn't end there, so we've got a new policy that we now need to implement, and that's quite a bit of work bringing that in. And I think, as Liz would have said before, that as we're our sort of implementation of new IT is in train, there are some changes that can only be made when that new IT is rolled out, but we are really keen to bring as much as we can in as soon as possible, and I'll be covering off what's changing over the next 3 slides. And as always happens, as you're working on a project, different things emerge. And there was something that our cabinet member, Councillor Tom Reynolds, was very keen that we spend a bit of time looking at, alongside the implementation of the review, and that's how we assess additional bedrooms for children that have special educational needs. So there's a good bit of work that we're doing with colleagues in education around both, who makes a decision, how we can make the process easier and more manageable for those families. And at the end, I'll talk a bit about our implementation board, which will oversee and drive forward the implementation of the new policy. So first slide about what's changing. So the things that we're wanting to start as soon as possible in the next few months is our move to a more managed choice system where up to half of the allocations can be made by means of a direct offer. So that's not a target that we have to meet, but it's an option for us to use that as needed. And really important for the local authorities that we increase the priority for care leavers moving on out of our care, putting them in band 1. So as Liz would have said, as it's taken a lot longer for most people to get housed, it's become particularly challenging for us to move our care leavers on in a timely manner when they transition from children to adults. So this will really help with that. The other things that we're keen to do as soon as possible will come a little bit later. Really pleased that we're looking at additional priority for existing tenants who are under occupying. So broadening out the types of scenarios where we can put people into band 1, which will hopefully increase mobility for existing social housing tenants, and also freeing up those larger families that are much needed for larger houses, that are much needed for families. Bit around our work around homelessness. Irrespective of what homelessness duty you will have, will put you in a band 2, and the main reason for that is to encourage people to approach us as soon as possible so that we can support them and reduce the risk of them losing their accommodation. And we've got introducing a new deal for people who are homeless at home, as Liz would have described previously, and that's on the slides there for you to see. Right, next slide. So a technical part of the policy is a thing called composite need, and this is our attempt at differentiating between households in the same band. So one of the criticisms of a banding scheme is it's quite a blunt tool. You put people in one of 4 bands, but the composite need allows us to distinguish between people within a band, and this provides a further level of distinction for people who have multiple housing needs, reasons to move. Other thing we're really pleased to get approval on is that our extension of local lettings policies. People may know we have one in Lawrence Weston and a recent one in Lockleys. We're working with community groups in Knoll, and there are several other areas that we'll be looking to implement local lettings policies in. And the key there is that we will set aside a percentage of properties for people who live locally, looking to meet local housing need in the city. And the things that unfortunately we've got to leave until when we've got the new IT in is some changes around thresholds, and also changing our approach to applications in band 4, where we will be looking to restrict bidding for those households who rarely get housed unless they're bidding on particular types of properties, like properties for older people, accommodation, etc. So that, and a couple of other things that we'll wait for the new technology to come in. So I did see a hand come up. Alex, was there somebody? And you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, Philip has got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I've raised this issue several times. I live in a supported housing project for older people, which is supported. I've had a stroke and we have alarm cables and everything.
Yeah.
But the whatever home choice, put anyone in here. I've just seen we've got flat number 20 vacant at present. I've seen the 3rd person view that property today. I just said, although Nivea is marvellous, I just said the lady was 45, no more than 50, walked quite well, carried a large handbag, she'd been shopping in Asda, and she met the lettings agent and went in to look at the place. Now, what is she doing in a supported housing? They don't need. We've got a bus driver who lives in here. He drives buses. He passes a medical every year. What's he doing in supported housing? He doesn't. He lives on his own in a 2-bedroom flat.
Yeah,
you know, this home choice is rubbish.
Phil, I'm not sure what the where you live and what the lettings rules around.
I live in Maudley House. It's supported housing for older people.
Okay, all right. So, and again, I saw a couple of other hands flash up. If I could just respond to that point, and then we'll get to other people on the call, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, there's a number of different types of housing for older people in the city managed by the council. So we do have sheltered housing, where typically the age restriction is 60, and we do have some other schemes where the age used to be sheltered housing, but the age restriction is now lower, where there might be a mix of people living there, some with support needs and some without. I'm not too familiar about your where you live, Phil, so I do apologise. So
it's age restricted 60.
Yeah. So where the so the way that it works on Home Choice is the properties are advertised and people are invited to bid according to the age restriction, and depending on how many people bid and who's successful, whether it's the city council or one of our housing association partners, there is the option of reducing the age to fill that vacancy. But if you like, I can take that specific question away and speak to our lettings manager and get back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, will do.
Paul's just, you got a hand up with Nigel's got his hand up.
They're great. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I can't see the hands. They come and they go. So yeah.
Yeah. No. So Nigel.
Yeah, I mean, I live in supported housing for over 60s as well. I can't believe my luck in actually getting this in the first place. But when I put in my bid, I think I was the only one who bid for this and got in, because there's a limited demand for council accommodation for the over 60s. I think that the question we have to ask ourselves, what would we rather have? Somebody homeless or in need of a housing, or an empty flat? And I think given the housing crisis in Bristol, we have to accept that younger people might come in. There are obvious problems which have to be guarded against. People who make who don't fit into an older people's housing block, people with kids. I know there are lots of people in Gilton House who get really uptight when when a young person is seen around the block. But given the housing crisis, I'd rather see somebody in a flat than it empty.
Paul.
Okay. Thank you, Nigel. Was there somebody else who had?
No, at the moment, I think that's all the hands I could see. So if you take that as a comment and then
I'll take
continue?
that as a comment. Yeah, okay. I think. Yeah, no. I think if other people wanted to come into the conversation, obviously they're more than welcome to.
Okay.
But yeah, I will get back to the specific point that Phil has raised. Okay, so we will do that. Okay, so other things that will be happening. So we're really keen on alongside our increased prioritisation for people who are looking to downsize or in properties too big to them. We're looking at creating a pilot to provide additional support to people who find the whole idea of moving home maybe a bit too much. We haven't completely shaped how that pilot's going to work, but there is an intention to do that in some shape or another. And lots of things that we've learned along the way as we are approaching. I think we might have reached now 20,000 households on the housing register. It's really important that our communication is clear, concise, and unambiguous, and providing as much information and guidance for people who are able to look and find out answers to the questions themselves. Clearly, we still have the service centre who answer phone calls, and we have the citizen service point for people who are able to come into the city centre. And one other thing that we are looking at, there were lots of associated policies and procedures that are linked to the allocation scheme, and one of them is how we look to move people out of supported housing to free up accommodation for people who need that type of housing. That's called the Priority Move On scheme, and we're having a good look at that and how we can increase people moving on to free up those much needed places, and also with colleagues within housing and landlord services, how we can make the most of mutual exchanges to support people to swap as a housing option for them. Okay, so on to implementation. We're yet to have our first board meeting. That's coming soon. Be a number of key council colleagues there, but importantly, our cabinet member Tom Renard will be at the board as well, and that board will have responsibility for overseeing the implementation, which will be over a reasonable period of time, as some of it will happen after our new IT system is in place. So the sort of how and the what around implementation is still to be worked through and will be steered by that board, and we look forward to taking this project forward. So I think if there was any other questions that colleagues on the call had, I think that's the end of the presentation, and I'll just leave that for a bit longer for people to read if they haven't read all of it before I take it down.
Okay, thank you,
Paul. Nigel.
Thank you. Yeah, so Nigel first, while others are thinking, feel free to raise a hand if you want to add. So Nigel.
I mean, the headline for this this policy has been bumping 9,000 people off the housing waiting list, the council housing waiting list. I think that's a mistake. I know the rationale for it was not to give, they stand absolutely no chance of getting a council house, so why give them false hope? But the issue is that the 19,000 people currently on the housing list is an indication of the housing problem in Bristol. And there is a massive housing crisis in Bristol, which people need to be aware of. And there needs to be some way of people who require affordable housing, who require council housing. And I don't like the term social housing. It's barracks for the poor. I prefer the term council housing. There needs to be a way of people who want a council house, even though there'd be no chance of them getting it, of registering that interest. Yeah. And if you don't give them the opportunity to get on the to bid, you lose that. So we have to have a fight in this city for council housing. We have to fight nationally for council housing. And just to massage the figures to make it appear so that it's not the smaller a problem than it isn't helpful.
So just to come back, we're not getting rid of people. That isn't the plan. So people will still be allowed to be on the housing register, but we're just going to restrict their bidding. So that will enable us to continue to have oversight of need in Bristol. It was it's very important for the administration that they didn't want, even though the headlines do say about bumping people off, that it was important that we did know the scale of demand in Bristol. So there was a balance between allowing people to apply, but restricting them on bidding, so that we know the demand, but we're saying, it just isn't going to happen for you unless there's particular circumstances like older people housing, accessible homes, or maybe some of the build to rent initiatives that are coming up. So yeah, so we're not, so the housing register will be the size it is at the moment. So I think it was it, I forget.
So I've got Kerry, Councillor Bales first, then I've got Pete Dole, and then I've got Philip. So
right, okay.
Councillor Bales.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, I didn't see it in your presentation, but I was tagged in a post on social media, and there is a discussion about siblings sharing bedrooms and what the age gap needs to be, and if it's same-sex siblings, what the how old they have to be before they don't have to share anymore. So there was a lot of conversations, lots of opinions, lots of misinformation, and I think I already know the answer because I've been in that position myself. But I think as a housing management board, we need to make sure that that's very clear.
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah. It isn't in the presentation yet because it hasn't changed, and I can share the sort of rules to be included in in the minutes later. But yeah, so it's same-sex siblings up to the age of 21, different sex siblings up to the age of 10. But just to be clear, there is no law to say that children of different sexes can share a bedroom. It's just a recognition around priority and bedroom need that it would be better for people to have their own room. This does speak to what our cabinet members really keen on, which is the thing around children with special educational needs and how we assess whether people need additional bedrooms, and that's something that we're looking at to improve the process.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So Pete next, and then Philip.
So firstly, thank you to Paul, and especially thank you to Liz, who I appreciate isn't here tonight, for the moving forward, if not completion, of this enormous task. Obviously, I was elected onto this board by the tenant forums, so I've been involved through the whole of the duration of the project, and it is a very substantial piece of work. I take on board the comment that Nigel made around this being reported negatively in the press, perhaps somewhat unfairly, given the levels of detail and the attempts at consultation, which have been massive, and taking on board tenants and leaseholders and prospective applicants' desires to change the system because it is over capacity. Whichever way we look at it, we are the last outpost of council housing in the Government Office South West region, the largest of the 9 Government Office regions. We're the only council housing left in South West England, and we run it incredibly well. We pick up awards for it. We are used as benchmarks throughout the city for our tasks, and what Liz has done is an amazing piece of work. But we are still a drop in the ocean of the need that is out there. And last time I looked at the figures, if we had every single property empty tonight, we would still struggle to fill every family on the waiting list and every family we currently have in emergency accommodation in the city tonight. And that's, that's the scale of need. I support the change to band 4. I think setting the unrealistic expectation wasn't helping anyone. I know it's horrible to have to do it, but we do need to do it, and it is a positive step, and alternatives are available, and the city work hard to deliver them. So I do want to thank Paul, and to also make an offer. And that offer is, of course, I have a background in IT implementation projects as a former project manager for IBM Global Services across Europe and Middle East Asia. I am a fellow with the Chartered Institute of Housing, as well as the School for Social Entrepreneurs and the Royal Society for the Arts. And I offer my services for free as a volunteer to the implementation board, if you can use them, Paul.
Thank you very much for your comments and your offer, Pete. I will certainly pass on those comments to Liz. I mean, I agree. She's done an absolutely amazing job in getting this over the line, and the engagement and consultation is something that we're really proud of, because it was far-reaching and very wide. And I'm hoping that people felt that they all had the opportunity to have some meaningful engagement with the work that we were doing. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for that. And an offer noted. Philip, do you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, it's just that I raised at the last meeting that I'm doing some research. I've not finished yet, but I'm contacting every local authority in England to ask their criteria for housing, be they housing associations or local authorities. And several have said that to qualify, including Slough, where my sister lives and actually works on the council, in the housing office, in the housing department, Slough Borough Council, that you've got to be on the electoral roll to get on the housing list. And in Slough as well, they've also implemented 2 years ago that you've got to have 5 years of accommodation with references before they will accept you. That you've got to be on the electoral roll for 5 years, and you've got to have 5 years of accommodation in the borough, because they say it's cut their applications by nearly a third, because people were living outside the borough and applying, and people we got no connections with the borough were applying. People in London were applying to go to Slough because it's within travelling distance. but my sister says that it's cut their allocations and they're housing more people now who have local connections because A, they've got the references from previous accommodation, plus they're on the electoral roll. So I rest my case.
So we do have a residency criteria for Bristol, which is 2 years. We don't check that people are on the electoral roll, and there are some exceptions to that. We didn't think as part of the review that we wanted to increase it any more than that. That certainly wasn't the feedback that we had from the various sessions that we had. But yeah, so we do have a 2-year residency criteria. Yeah.
Okay. Any other? I've got no hands up on people I can see. People I can't see. Anybody else like to? I think Councillor Bales has a hand up. But I think that may be a residual hand from previously. I'm not sure unless that's a new one. I think it was a residual. We'll take that as a residual. Anybody else who'd like to ask Paul anything else about where we are with the review or anything that's not clear as we move into implementation? Paul, it looks like the board is content. Thank you very much. Okay. Are you staying with us or are you departing at this stage?
I am. I've got a security guard outside who wants me to leave the building, so I think I need to go. It's okay.
In that case, thanks for coming on and thanks for your presentation. That's really
appreciate
helpful.
Your feedback and questions, and I think it was just feel that I needed to get back to, but I will do that. Okay. Thanks very much.
Paul. All right.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. In that case, we move on to item 6, which is update on the investment in communal areas, blocks and estate budget. So that's Sarah.
Chair, with your agreement, I've suggested that Alison goes next. I'm here to the end of the meeting, so we'll just swap our orders around if that's okay. And we'll ask Ali to do her update on environmental improvement bid.
Oh, we've gone freestyle. Okay. We've gone freestyle. In that case, we'll
freestyle if I can't get my presentation up on this technology, Alex. So
in that case, we should turn our minds to environmental and neighbourhood improvement budgets.
Thank you.
Can you see that?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. What I'm talking about today is the environmental and neighbourhood improvement budgets, and basically just giving a flavour of where they've been spent, and also to try and get some ideas for how we can publicise it more, because we're very, very conscious that it's often the similar tenants or it's not known far and wide. So I'm hoping that some of you will have some ideas about how we can get the message out there. The actual amount we've got is a lot of money in reality. We've got 137,000 EIB and we've got 462,000 NIB, which is significant amounts to make a difference on the estates. Most of the budget is, I would say nearly all of it is suggested by tenants, by housing officers, by caretakers and some councillors. But I would say that the councillors are low. We've had the Ashley Down councillors recently making some suggestions. And there's a very easy way to apply for it. How to make suggestions is online, yet this form is very rarely used. It's on the website, and I must be honest, I think only Redcliffe tenants have ever suggested anything online, really. The housing officers, when they're out and about, get lots of suggestions from coffee mornings, from I know Nigel suggested things for Gilton when work was done, things like that. But generally, the more suggestions we get, the better, because it is the tenants' views that we want, really. The NIB, the larger amount, we allocate at the beginning of the year. We get lots of schemes that are big packages, and these have got to be put out to tender. So anything that's over 15,000 needs to go through a tender process. So as you can imagine, we have to do this at the beginning, because by the time we've got contractors and people bidding in, that's at the beginning. But the EIB bid, each month we save some back. So it's not allocated at the beginning of the year. So as people think of things throughout the year, there's money still there. So we make sure it's spread throughout the year. The criteria are predominantly security or ecological improvements. And when I give you some examples later on, you'll see what that means in reality. So generally, these are the sort of things that we've been doing this year. Things like the installation of security gates, boundary fencing, a lot more bin and recycling areas. There's a big push on those. A lot of tenants have wanted those in areas. We've had car park resurfacing and we've had garden works and landscaping. And the last one, the garden work and landscaping, is always very popular, and you'll see why in a minute from the pictures. The number of projects we did under EIB, have been 37. Now you can see on there that some were rejected. The things that are rejected are generally where it's an individual asking for something for them. So like a garden fence, rather than something for the community. So they're proposed and sometimes they're costed up. But if it's an individual who wants something, that is not the scope of this budget. And some are awaiting consultation. We have had some consultation where people have wanted something like security. We've designed a fence or some railings, and when they've seen the outcome or the proposals, they then decided they don't want it because aesthetically they'd rather not have railings that make their scheme look like a prison. Or we had some benches proposed, and when the scheme was put forward, the people who lived in the flats near the benches didn't want people sat under their windows. So, you know, there are reasons that things are proposed, seem all right on paper, but when further consultation's done, it doesn't materialise. The actual spend has been across the city on the EIB, so the north, central and south. It's not even, but where bids come from is where the money goes. So this year, the central area have come in with most bids. Nevertheless, we didn't spend it all, as you can see. We've only spent 74,000. But the money that was underspent has been put in the NIB fund, so it hasn't been lost and has been spent. So all the money, bar a small, about 20 grand, has been spent on improvements and budget and the budget on the areas. Right, these improvements have included everything from securing a garage site to bin relocation and renovation of a courtyard at Rusholme. So what I'm going to do is show you some of these pictures just so you can see the impact that's made. Here was the dangerous structure at Ludlow Court. It's in the middle there. We had a lot of complaints from residents about children injuring themselves on it, and it was removed and is now a safe area for people to play. So the residents were really pleased, although a couple of residents wanted something to replace it, so we haven't got that far yet. We've got a garage site here where we send fly tipping, antisocial behaviour. You can see it's now been gated off, and as a result, the fly tipping and the antisocial behaviour has been minimised. Here, we had complaints from residents that the fire engines and the ambulances couldn't park because the signage didn't look very good, and as a result, people were just parking their cars there. When it was revamped, it's been much better. This is Jack Knight House. I don't know if anybody will recognise it, but as you can see, this has helped considerably. And here we've got the Rusholme House. This was a patio garden area that they asked us to refurbish for them, and now it looks like this, which I'm sure everybody will agree is a vast improvement on the last place, and it is much more used. You've got the containers there, the raised beds, the benches. So that was mainly the sort of EIB work. The next work is the NIB work, and this we spent nearly 700,000 on. And I mentioned that we'd slightly underspent. But the NIB, here you can see the disparity in where it is. We've only had one scheme in the north, 4 in central and 9 in the south. The one scheme in the north was an expensive one. It was at Priestwood Close, and was done in conjunction with the police and the local community as part of a bigger plan for Crow Lane. So although we did Priestwood Close ourselves, other work was being done in the area, and that was quite an expensive scheme. Again, as you can see, the issues around communal gardens, railings, excavation, brickwork, and car park resurfacing. And again, you can see across the city where they are: Yew Tree Court, Chatterton House, Priestwood, Buckham. So it's not like one area that's getting it all. And this was the best one that got most satisfaction. And as you can see, this one's one of the garden refurbishments. I think this is Yew Tree Court, if I'm honest. Yes, there we go. So really what I'm asking is, how can we get the message out? How can we get so that everybody gets a chance to bid? And how can we reach perhaps areas that don't bid for it, really? That's my presentation. There you go.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's fantastically helpful and fantastically clear. So I've got a long-standing hand from Nigel, I think.
I'll get me a pen.
Sorry. Right.
So somebody's still sharing their screen. I think that might be. I think you've shut your PowerPoint down, Alison, but you're still screen. That's the kiddie.
Is that better? I'm nearly succeeding with the technology.
Yes, Nigel.
What I want to emphasise is the importance of information to tenants and tenants' involvement, because we had a really positive meeting a few months ago, to discuss the improvement of Gilton House, and we're one of the few tower blocks with no grounds. We've got a tiny bit of grass, which we've got nothing else apart from one of the busiest, one of the worst traffic jams in Bristol outside our door. But we thought we were. Somebody's banging. Who's banging? You hear a banging? Anyway, sorry. We put in our requests to go on this, but we've had no information back. All I understand is that the housing office has been around with a surveyor. There are tenants. There are tenants who are very, very keen to take part in this, and some of them I think have started work on designing, on doing designs for environmental improvements. The most recent information I've had is that the money might be running out, and we're worried that because we're going to have to wait until the building work's finished at Gilton House before anything's done, it might have all gone by the time we're ready. So the crucial thing is to constantly inform people what's going on. It's no good sending emails to me, so I'm supposed to be the spokesperson because I'm not. I'm just a bloke with the biggest mouth. And also to involve the talents of people who want to make a contribution to the environment. So what I'm asking for is clarity. We want to know: are we going to get environmental improvements to Gilton House? If so, how much money might be involved? How are we going to get involved? And so on and so forth. And that needs to be quite urgent, because a gang of us were sort of lurking around our one bit of grass, talking about what we're going to do with it, and we might take unilateral action and then try and claim the money back, and I don't think we get it back. In terms of consultation, I mean, you talk about improvement to community rooms. You've got to talk to people. We got these horrible chairs arrive one day off the back of a lorry that obviously been removed from somewhere else, which are uncomfortable and look awful, and nobody asked us whether we wanted them or not. They just arrived, and here they are. Take that. You're all old people, you want these chairs. He's obviously come out from an old people's home. God knows by some of the stains what's been done on them. But it's that level of talking to people. I've said this beforehand in service user groups. Tenants are often treated as objects and not subjects, and there are loads of people in Gilton House willing to take part in this and be consulted.
Well, first of all, the money hasn't run out. We've got a new budget for this year, so none of the neighbourhood investment budget has been committed or spent yet, Nigel. So there's no danger of the money running out, and the EIB bids are literally 1 month in. So again, there's no money running out there, so you're fine on that.
Sorry, can I just put one thing in? You mentioned having to apply with a form on the website. If we've done it through our housing officer, do we still?
No, that's fine. No, what I'm saying is that's an option for people who don't have access to a housing officer, don't want to have access to an housing officer. You can still make suggestions without finding a housing officer, is why that form is there, Nigel. So as long as somebody's got it in view. Okay. And you said that there's a surveyor already been out with a housing officer, so they should be drawing up plans for consultation. That's why the surveyor comes out, to see what's possible, what they can do, what they can cost. So I'll get them to get back in touch with you, Nigel, specifically about that. That's an action.
Not me as an individual to call them.
No, the Gilton House.
Yeah.
Okay. That's no problem at all. Keeping people informed, couldn't agree more. There's nothing worse than putting in a suggestion that going quiet and not hearing. I mean, that is a flaw of us across the piece. So, you know, yes, I accept that. And not talking to one person, you're right. We do try to talk to people, and some of our consultation, particularly at some of the schemes in Southmead, we put boxes in community rooms. We sat there at coffee mornings. But I agree with you that you know, it's not always. We tend to deal with a group of people who are perhaps more active, and we could do better on that. And community rooms are not with the EIB bid, actually, Nigel. I don't know whether they're being refurbished as part of your planned, you know, development at your flat block of flats. So I don't know about that. There's some other projects that do cover community rooms, like Jewson's project and social value, that are written into some of our procurement contracts. But we're not doing your community room under the environmental improvement bids, not to my knowledge, anyway.
So can we take that as an action to find out where that's originated?
Yeah, I certainly can. I'll do that. I'll do that. Yeah,
I mean,
the other thing we want a tunnel dug under what is now the Bath Road to divert all the traffic right from under Brislington to the other side of the Ring Road to remove that traffic jam with a flyover onto West Town Lane and with a Baroque fountain in the middle. Is that all right?
All for 700, all for 700 grand. All for 700
absolutely.
Grand. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. So I've got three hands, virtual and wrist. So I got Liz first, then I got Philip, then I got Pete. Liz?
Oh yeah, it's just a quick comment really. Ali, I've posted the link in the chat to where people can make suggestions online. And Jeremy, could we perhaps add that into the minutes, that link?
Okay, thank you for that. So then I've got Philip, then I've got Pete. Philip?
Hello, Ali.
Hiya.
How do? The thing is, we had an environmental improvement budget makeover for our garden. I wish you'd shown our garden before and after. It's wonderful now.
Oh, great. I'll include it next time, Phil.
But the only problem with it is they forgot the benches.
Oh.
We've got no benches and we've got no housing officer because she only works Monday, Tuesday each week and every other Wednesday. And I've got an email from her which I sent to our marvellous mayor saying she doesn't have time to answer emails. But I didn't know the form was online. I will go online and find it because we would like our the benches replaced and possibly a table because we've got nowhere. We're taking chairs down. We're taking chairs out of skips when we find one that's good enough. And there's about 12-15 people even in this cold weather. There's 6 or 8. I was there this morning with 5 other people having a chat and a chinwag. But you know,
well, in regards to the benches, Phil, I mean, I'm not speaking, you know, I shouldn't think there'd be a problem. There's plenty of money for benches. So if you want to submit that, no problem at all.
Well,
Phil.
we were told it was part of the benches and table, a picnic type table with a bench on, would be part of the project.
For the previous work, and it's not materialised.
It's never materialised.
Okay.
Thank you for what you did. And thank you for your presentation.
Oh,
that's
thank
great.
You.
That's great, Phil. And there's a mystery to be pursued there. So I've got Pete, and then I've got Sarah. So Pete first.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Professor Marsh. Hey, Scotty, good to have you on the call. I'm just going to embarrass Alison a little bit more by thanking her personally. About 30 years ago, I founded a charity, Brixton, which Alison has been a trustee of and provided her time and resource to for many years. So I just want to thank her for the work she does outside of her council hat, which has a positive impact on the lives of Bristolians and has done for 30 years. It's a very small but very, very impactful project. Alison, you made reference to environmental bids not really being bid for in the north, and there's one which I'd love to, just sound you out over. Here on the Eastfield, not Eastville,
No.
Eastfield estate, where we have Eastfield Park, we have quite possibly the most unloved park in the southwest.
Yes.
No benches, no nothing. Street lights, a bit of paving. We even buried the previous brick mounds that are in there, so it's not even flat. You can't even play football on it. The council keeps removing rather than repairing or replacing the furniture for the kids there. So our residents have taken to throwing a sheet over it and doing film nights in the summer because it's literally the last remaining use for the broken kids' furniture there. So can that be looked at? Secondly, there's a obscure fact about this estate that blows people's heads. We're a bit like Biker Wall. We are separated from the rest of the community by a 1 mile long chain link fence. You can't get from BS9 Eastfield to BS10 Southmead because for a mile and a half from Westbury upon Trim Village to the Southmead Road is a fence. It has 2 places where there's 1 path and 1 gate, and the gate itself is not passable in a wheelchair, a pushchair, or like myself, a walker. The path isn't lit and therefore is useless at night and unsafe. So we're cut off from the ward, even though we are part of Southmead Ward F now. We cannot get to Southmead because there's a Trim Valley Westbury Wildlife Park in between us. Now, ironically, Avon County Council footpath 123 was put in place to go past the entrance of the park. So there's one that goes from the Eastfield estate into the next street, and a second that goes from that street into Westbury on Trim Village. Needless to say, it has a slope at the top, a slope at the bottom, but steps in the middle, which makes it impassable for people like myself who use a walker, a wheelchair, or indeed parents with prams going to the Church of England school the opposite side of the valley. Because it's privately owned by the park, but is a public footpath, and Avon County Council was abolished in the 70s, it's just been abandoned. It has literally gone from being 3-foot high planting to trees that are taller than the road above it, 70 foot high. Can we, on behalf of the residents who are literally landlocked by a ½ mile long freshwater lake and a 1 mile long chain link fence, have a path that we can use to get to the village? We're part of the parish of Westbury on Trim, even though we're part of the polling place of Southmead Ward F. And I do not have enough contempt to describe my anger towards the stupidity of the then MP and councillor who asked for that, despite a record number of objections to the Local Government Boundary Commission objecting to it. We are literally landlocked. We have a narrow 3-foot wide path, and we can't use it if, like myself, you've had 3 stroke, 2 heart attack, a massive bilateral pulmonary embolism, and need to use a walker. It's mud with a couple of concrete steps in it. And the Westbury Wildlife Park Foundation, after a 40-year hiatus, have now reopened. It would be really useful for them to have the entrance crossing their front drive, crossing the private road that is theirs, available for people to get to the entrance to the park. But there is, after all, a cafe, a yoga studio, and lots of work with young people and school kids that are a vibrant part of our community. But we can't get there because it's a path that has a slope, a steps, and then a slope again. So if you're disabled, you can't navigate it. And it's the only escape from this estate into the Westbury upon Trim Village. Can we, you know,
I'll have
if
a
I
look,
put a bid
Peter,
in,
at what,
can we have a look?
what that entails. I'll have a look. I'll investigate further into what we can do or what we can try and get people to do. So don't worry. And there is some money for parks that Councillor Renhard has put aside. And if it's linked to the Eastfield Park improvement, we'll see what we can do. I can't promise because I don't know anything about, you know, what you mentioned is all, you know, really quite interesting actually. But I'll make a note of and explore it further for you, Peter.
It's just absurd that we are literally landlocked. We are a pedestrianised estate, and many of our paths are against the fence line of the Westbury Wildlife Park and have not been maintained since the 1970s, so are impassable. And the ones that take us into the village are never have been passable, but have not been maintained for 50 years. And the metal railing is literally rotting and falling apart and rusting in your hand as you put your hand on it. If the park try their best to maintain it, lovely Jackie comes out with salt, trying to melt snow and ice in the winter to keep it navigable. But it's a very, very steep slope. And sorry, but after my most recent bilateral pulmonary embolism, in which I was given an air to live, I just can't, and me and plenty of other people on this estate just can't use the only path that takes us to the village where our shops are.
Okay, Pete, I think you've made the point eloquently. I think you've got an undertaking there to take it away and investigate it and take that seriously. So I think we can note that. Sarah, did you want to come in on that or pick up on something else?
So I had my hand up for another reason. There was something in the chat from Councillor Bales, and I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose it. So, Ali, there was a question from Councillor Bales about the I'm not quite sure what you called it, the monument, the thing that was in Ludlow Close, and
yes,
she asked what it was. The structure, that was the term. Have you got any information about what that actually is or was?
Like a fountain or something? What was the structure that was removed?
Fountain. It was a statue to something, and it had like a pointy, jaggedy bits at child height. So as children running around, there's this like thing sticking out that was, I think it was just a statue, if I'm honest. I don't think it was a fountain. I don't think it was quite as exciting as a fountain, but it was some sort of, but I certainly can find out what it was, because you can see from the original picture what it looked like. But I can find out what it was. Yes, definitely, Sarah. And I can send it to the minutes, or I can send it direct to Councillor Bale.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for that. Any other questions to Alison? Or do we say thank you very much for that presentation, and thanks for listening to colleagues' comments and taking some stuff away. We look forward to hearing of developments in future. Yeah, well, yes, future developments.
Yes.
Hopefully including progress. Hopefully including progress, yes. Thank you very much. So
no problem.
If you need to leave now, then that's fantastic. And we will move back up the agenda to item 6 to update on investment in communal areas, blocks and estates. Sarah.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing us to rejig the running order. I will make this will be quite a quick update because it is an update. So this is following on from an item that we brought to the board back in January, and I will try and put this into slideshow, but it is deciding not. There we go. So if we can give technology 1 minute to work. No, it is.
No, right. So
not quite liking that. So can I check? Am I just sharing a blank screen with you?
At the moment we've got a SharePoint frame by look of it, but nothing in the frame.
No, it was not working for me. Let me try and sort it out, and if not, I can just provide you with an update instead, and we'll try and move us on.
I think it was there initially, Sarah, but it was reduced size.
Yeah, I tried to. I think I tried to get the size right, and in the process, I managed to lose it completely. So what I might do is just share it as this size so that I don't lose the slideshow entirely. So as I said, we brought an item back in January about the budget provision that we had for investing in blocks, communal areas and estates. And at that time we had investment, we were using that budget to do several things, including the provision of our rapid response scheme, to provide an assisted gardening scheme to help residents who were unable to look after their garden with some support. We were increasing the environmental improvement and neighbourhood improvement budgets. And we have money set aside to make improvements in communal waste and recycling facilities. And we had 1.3 million uncommitted, and we asked the board's views on how we should use that. So this is an update about how we have broken down the remainder of that budget. So we have made provision for this financial year and next financial year for an estate safety budget that will focus on CCTV infrastructure, but not only CCTV infrastructure. So that's 655,000 over 2 years, and I've underlined 655,000. It's a small change from the slide deck that I shared with you, because I had put 650 in there, so I missed the 5. We've also made provision of 1.6 million over the next 3 financial years to carry out an enhanced programme of stock condition surveys on 80% of our stock. So we anticipate that work starting in autumn of this year, and we are outsourcing the work in order to do that. And this is very much tied in with our approach to damp and mould and our proactive approach in identifying and tackling any damp and mould that we have in homes. And as we talked about back in January, obviously that's got a huge amount of national focus at the moment, and we are making sure within Bristol that we are being responsive to identifying damp and mould within our stock. So one of the tools that we have at our disposal is the fact that we do proactive stock condition inspections. So we need to step those up. And we've also made provision from this year for an extra £130,000 per year to increase our housing officer and tenancy management resources, because we know how important those are to residents. And we've made some provision for additional training, and we'll be targeting that at fire and building safety and damp and mould. And from this year, we will be creating some dedicated building and fire safety teams. As we've discussed before, we've got an enhanced kind of programme of fire safety activity following changes that happened last year, and we've got new burdens and new requirements from the Building Safety Act. So we need dedicated resources to be able to respond to those. And just as a reminder, I've included you said we did, so we have made that estate safety provision, but we have made sure that as well as CCTV, it's available for wider safety measures, particularly lighting. I know that was something that Pete Zoll was very passionate about when we spoke last time. And when we spoke to the board in January, you were very supportive about our efforts to make sure we were tackling damp and identifying damp and mould. And so therefore, a very large provision has been made for an enhanced stock condition survey programme to make sure that we're proactively carrying out stock surveys on all of our council homes. So I will come back and ask if there are any questions or any comments.
So I've got a hand up from Philip. Do you want to come in at that point, Philip?
Yes, thank you. The 327,500. Will that partly be used? Because as you know, and I've said before, Northfield, Birchall, and Maudley have store CCTV cameras, but no recording. So you can't even act retrospectively if something happens. And in Northfield, there are cameras in the lifts, but you might as well leave chocolate bars for everyone because they're no use. So can these 3 blocks of flats, and perhaps others in the area, I don't know every other block, but could they have recording system put in, as I discussed previously? It can be done very cheaply, so long as there's a secure place for the computer camera recording system. Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you, Philip. So at the moment, what we're doing is looking at how that budget can be best used. What I will do is I will share that proposal with the budget holder, who's Fiona Lester, who's the head of estate services. And it may well be that that's an item that could come to future meetings, I think, for further discussion, because I'm assuming it's something the board may be interested in. But we can, when we talk about future meetings, we can take any requests for future items as part of that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, certainly, I think in relation to our previous item, it was valuable not just to see that the money was available, but also to get a flavour of what it was used for. I think that's been helpful. So yes, that seems to me to be good. And I've got Pete, and then I've got Nigel. Pete.
Thank you, Sarah, for the presentation and also for the slides in advance. I guess I'm always slightly reticent and wary about CCTV, partly because of my experience as the housing officer for St Paul's for Knightstone, and the fact that it was always useless. However, with the greatest intention in the world, you're retrospectively looking at an image of something that happened in way too low a grain of definition and usually the wrong lighting to be able to use in court. It was just frankly shocking. The other side of CCTV, however, is sometimes when we put schemes in, we also create an obligation on tenants as an increase to a service charge in communal areas. And I just want to touch upon that as a question to see, are we creating obligations upon future liabilities? I know a huge amount of work was done with the estate management board, and when it reached the costing stage of going out to tenants and asking, would you like these things in your home? They all said, we'd love them, but we can't afford the service charges on them at the levels that they're currently being proposed. And that was even before the cost of living crisis that we're currently in. So I want to be a little bit pragmatic and realistic, if you don't mind.
Sarah.
Absolutely. So what we're looking at doing, Peter, is improving the infrastructure that we have. So what that means is that some of our cameras need replacing, and some of the cabling that service the cameras also need replacing, because as you said, I think there's an issue around the quality of what's in there. So what we're looking at is improving the quality of what we have rather than completely new provision. Historically, as you said, we have asked residents about whether or not they would like CCTV because of that ongoing financial burden. So we make sure that we consult whenever we would consider putting in anything new, because there is a cost implication, and it's only fair that residents get a say in that. So absolutely taken on board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nigel.
It's just a question about how you decide where to do this, because Gilton House had quite a serious intrusion a few years ago, and we did in a tenants meeting request an improved CCTV specifically to record what the door entry camera picks up. And we were told at the time there's no money, and the request just disappeared. What I'd like to know is whether that request was ever logged to be dealt with when money was available, or whether we have to submit a new request for that. The requests are made often when something happens, when there's been a break-in or people get in the block, and then it disappears off into the system, and then suddenly money arrives, and we don't know whether we're on the list or what.
Okay.
Thank you, Nigel. That's something we can take away.
So the broader question about where the money gets spent, or how the priorities are identified, including, is there a list of things that are on a wish list already should money become available? Yes, right. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Philip. You got I'm not sure if this is a new hand or
it's a new hand. Thank
you.
Go for it. I'd like to correct Peter. He lives in Westbury on Trim, I think. I lived in Barton Hill. No one would go outside their block of flats after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. CCTV arrived. It's a new location. People are out at night in the playground, and I don't not mean anti-social behavior, I mean parents with kids and everything. And then you go back to the flats at the back of the bus station. They had CCTV. When the £5 charge came in, they all rejected it. So the council took the cameras out. I know someone who lives in Dub Street, and they want the cameras back now because it's full of junkies and people with, what do the council call them? Social issues. I mean, so CCTV is not only a deterrent, it works when the operators can sort of operate it. But for Peter to just dismiss it. I don't know when he worked for the housing association he worked for, but it's certainly not worked for the last. It works in Barton Hill. It worked in Dove Street. Dove Street want it back, but the council won't put it back because of the costs incurred.
So I think we might, on that point, I think we might be talking about works in slightly different meanings of the term work there are in play, I think. So one's a deterrent, the other in it, does it actually provide useful evidence, which is a slightly different point. Okay, I think I've got Nigel and then Pete again. So Nigel first and then Pete. Unless that's a residual hand, Nigel, you sort of frozen again.
Yeah,
Peter,
it looks like he may have frozen.
Peter, Pete, do you want to come in at this stage in case Nigel
comes back?
Yeah, I'm not frozen, so I'll jump in there. I take the points you're making, Phil, but my experience is different. And that experience includes the lived experience of living, like yourself, in Barton Hill, in my case in Corbett House, on the 13th floor, and being thrown out when my partner died of an AIDS-related illness. Let me repeat that. The death of my partner to an AIDS-related illness led the city to evict me from Corbett House and cause me to be homeless. Why do you think I'm so passionate about housing, and why did I do my training to become a housing officer? Why did I do my test of professional practice in the inner city of St. Paul's for the second largest landlord in the city, Knightstone, to get my first class degree in housing? I did it because of the very we talk about on this board every single time we meet. It was 2000 to about 2010 that I worked for Knightstone in St. Paul's as a housing officer. It is a little while ago, obviously. The technology has improved since. I'm willing to accept that things have improved in particular in terms of the number of actual CCTV centres that Bristol has and its ability to lay cable into those locations across the fibre optic network the city itself owns, having bought out a failed TV company. There are things that have improved since I worked frontline housing in St. Paul's for sure. But the point I would make is the research. Home Office Research Study number 78, which points out that the evidence gathered by the police, gathered by the Home Office, is that street lighting improvements are more effective in deterring and preventing crime than putting in CCTV. And the experience that I had and my colleagues continue to have is when we take images to court, and I used to spend every Monday in the Bristol County Court for a decade, the quality of the image has to be absolutely brilliant for a county court judge to accept it and provide a conviction. The standard expected by the court service, the standard required by the Crown Prosecution Service, who after all operate has to be above 70 or 80%, I forget the figure, probability of conviction before they'll even take the case into the courtroom. So we have to make it as easy as possible. And upgrading, as Sarah is suggesting, those cables and those cameras on existing schemes is a way to do that, and I fully support it.
Thank you, Peter and Phil. Can I just say, for me, it's been a really interesting conversation, and I think it's why it's important that we have the voices of different residents in our meetings, and that we try to hear the voices of as many people as we can, because everyone's lived experience and everyone's view is really different. So it's been really useful for me to hear those opposing views and to try and take on board why people think different things about CCTV. So thank you both for your input into that discussion.
And just to reinforce the point that you made in your presentation, Sarah, which is that point, that bullet point is intentionally broadened. The budget head includes lighting and other. So it started out as CV. It's not rejecting CCTV, but it's broadening it from CCTV only to say, well, in other contexts, it might be more appropriate to focus on other measures. So I think they're still in play, I guess, would be the way to think. I would think about it.
Yes,
anyway.
Absolutely. And I think that next step in coming back for conversations in the future about how we identify the priorities and the things that we spend will be really important, because I think both Nigel, Phil and Peter have raised those questions about what do you do with that money, because whilst it does sound like a lot of money to me, I'm aware that it will never go as far as we want it to. So I think that's an important next step in our conversation.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'm very conscious of where we are in our agenda. We don't have an item 7 though, so if there's no other points about Sarah's presentation. Thank you very much for the update. And there's another round to come when we get more specific by the sound of it. So that really just takes us to any other business. Does anybody else who's still with us have any other business? Sarah?
I just wanted to take the opportunity to let the board know that I'm leaving the City Council at the end of June, and I just wanted to thank everyone here for all of your contributions and all of your input. I've attended many board meetings over the last few years, and I always find the comments and the feedback we get and the questions that we get very pertinent and very helpful. So I wanted to take the opportunity to say goodbye to those board members who I may not see again, although I may well see some of you over the next couple of months.
Well, thanks for that news as well. All the best if you're moving on. So I'm sure the board would agree with that sentiment. So any other business? Liz? Oh no, that's just a comment in there right in front. I thought that was a. Thank you, Sarah. Absolutely, Nigel, and then Pete. Nigel?
It's a request. Could you give me and other board members and other tenants involved in tenant participation a structure list or diagram of who's who in the housing department? I don't know whether if it exists online, if you could point us in that direction. Otherwise, you know, a diagram of who's in charge of what, because it gets very confusing as to who's who and who does what.
I can understand that. So that we underneath Donald Graham, I think we've got about 800 members of staff. So there is a good reason why the who's who is confusing, but we can certainly provide you with a structure chart for the sort of most senior level.
A management structure, yes, a management structure.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
There's an action there. Thank you. Peter and then Philip.
So yes, can I just second that request and also ask for contact details of email and phone where they are possible to be put on that? That would be very helpful indeed. The point I want to raise as any other business actually is a pretty big one that the board hasn't necessarily considered, and it's the City Leap partnership. Obviously, Councillor Kai Dudd in particular has done an enormous piece of work, which I commend immensely, towards taking the city closer to its 2030 target of net zero. And, you know, as we approach next weekend, when the capital will be taken over by Extinction Rebellion and others, and as we reflect upon, you know, the World Snooker Championships involvement of Just Stop Oil, these are sensitive and evocative topics. But the elephant in the room that perhaps Councillor Renard and Councillor Dudd could address is the transition from predominantly gas central heated boilers and hot water towards net carbon neutral forms of heating and hot water. The last figure I saw, even with a £135 million a year turnover, the cost of replacing the boilers in the existing tenants' homes is greater than our turnover for about 5 years. It goes to £500 million. And I don't see that there is a comprehensive plan, action, strategy, policy, whatever we want to call it, to provide tenants who are currently experiencing a cost of living crisis and a capped but really staggering level of fuel price increase, any form of remission from the levels of fuel poverty we're currently experiencing. Obviously, I'm disabled. I'm a victim of the bedroom tax. I, you know, supposedly whilst in receipt of full housing benefit, have to find several £100 a year, actually over £1,000 a year, towards the cost of my rent, whilst on full housing benefit, signed off as unable to work. And even with no expectation that I will return to the workplace ever again for the rest of my life, I face a black hole on my rent account, but receive no help from discretionary housing payment. So I want to ask about this black hole of fuel poverty. I want to ask about the actions that the landlord services teams are taking to first of all acknowledge, to secondly plan and mitigate, and third to provide us with timeframes and costings and where we're going to get the money from to do this. Now, if I were an owner-occupier, I would probably have had a £140,000 budget on my individual house given to me by Bristol Green Capital in the desperation of the former Mayor George Ferguson OBE, who was buying votes using the money that was supposedly ring-fenced for improvements to tenants' homes. I saw the bid, I saw the city bid for European money to improve tenants' homes to put photovoltaic electric roofs on our homes. And my home actually was one of them. Forgive the flickering lights there, the power is currently failing. My home was one of them that the city said is 100% renewable, 100% daylight, would make a really easy target as a bungalow, would be really simple to fit, and I was promised a photovoltaic electric roof during European Green Capital Year. Guess what? It was another broken promise. Now, that administration has failed and gone by the wayside. Our current administration is finding it hard to take on new projects because it too has had its structures torn up. I do not know whether the Homes and Communities Board will exist beyond the period when Bristol returns to being the city where good ideas come to die under a resumption of the cabinet structure. I don't know whether this board, tenant participation though it may be, will survive the change. But as a tenant, I want to know when and how the gas boiler in my home is going to be replaced and what with. And I want it costed and funded in the same way that the City Leap has been. You're doing great things. The government is giving away blank cheques to owner-occupiers and is putting in place ground source heat pumps. I'm literally, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm literally experiencing power fluctuation because the national grid can't provide a stable electricity supply to my disabled adapted bungalow, in which I use a respirator, a continuous positive airway pressure device, just to be able to breathe. So the supply of electricity, the supply of heating to my home are things I'm very sensitive about because they are life and death. We've not had a commitment. We've not had a plan. We're failing to achieve our net zero 2030 target if we don't also involve the 27,500 homes that Bristol acts as landlord to. So I need to ask the difficult question of what are we doing? How are we moving this forward? How are we funding it? When will it happen?
Okay, Pete. Well, I think that's a clear request to take back. I think Sarah, you can take that one forward with.
I can absolutely take that back as a request for future agenda items.
And we know, thank you. And we know Councillor Bale's comment in the chat about the wishing us luck on identifying a structure for the department.
Completely. Yeah.
Having tried it for elsewhere. So Philip, maybe any other business?
Just a quick one. One of the residents of Northfield is having all the plaster removed from her living room, having all the plaster removed on 2 walls because it's blowing out. And she's having her ceiling replaced, which is Artex. She suffers, she's a quite elderly lady, so suffers from OCPD or something. And she, is it COPD or something?
COPD.
And she just wants to know, can she be decamped somewhere? Because she shouldn't be living where she is, really. She's on the 2nd floor of Northfield House. And how does she go about finding to be she wants to move out while they do the work because she said all the dust and the noise will just affect her, something terrible.
Okay.
So what's the rules regarding finding out how to decamp? I mean, we've got an empty flat here she could move into.
Philip, I've got your email address. I will follow up outside of this meeting and let you know who she needs to be speaking to about that.
I'll give you, on the email, I'll give you her name and address. Obviously, I've not given it at the moment.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, no, of course not. That's fine. You and I can follow up outside of this meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody who isn't on screen, any other business that they would like to raise? If not, I suggest that we note the next meeting date, which is the 10th of July,